Okay, welcome everyone to the Algebra 1 Common Core Regents exam, June 2017. It's over. I can't believe it's the end of the year already. So this is what we're gonna do. First of all, welcome to my channel. If you've seen other videos in the past, just understand that this is my first time doing Algebra 1 for the videos. I've done geometry in the past, but we're moving into a new era of my website and my channel. So please enjoy it, welcome, and hopefully that you can use it for future resources. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go over or just take a look at the Algebra 1 Common Core exam and see how you did on it. I'm not going to lie, it was kind of tricky. Some of the questions were definitely challenging. I thought it was fair, but I definitely thought that some of the questions were challenging. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. These are the answers to the June 2017 Algebra 1 Common Core Regents exam. Now, this video is going to go kind of quickly. It's really not meant for explanations, kind of see how well you did on it, or just to see what type of questions you had, or maybe that you had any confusions. You could come here and just see what you're doing, or what you did on your test. We're going to do the whole exam. We're going to do all of it. Usually I split them into parts, but tonight, or today, whenever you're watching this, we're going to be doing the whole thing, start to finish, and we're going to see how we did, and I hope that you all passed. The passing score on this exam, I believe, was 27 points to get, so that's equivalent to, if you're thinking to be on the safe side, 14 multiple choice would have been perfectly fine in order to get a passing score on this test. Ignore this at the moment, but please hit that subscribe button down there because there's a lot more math videos coming. This is just to get these videos out there as soon as possible to see how well you did on this exam. So I hope that you all did well, and let's just jump right into it just because I want to see how we did, and of course I know that we're all very eager to get started. Make sure you visit my website, which is www.nysmathregionsprep.com. Without further ado, let's get started. So, I apologize for the copy, because this was scanned in, so it's definitely not the clearest copy, but, we do what we gotta do. So, let's take a look at number 1. To keep track of his profits, the owner of a carnival booth decided to model his ticket sales on a graph. He found that his profits only declined when he sold between 10 to 40 tickets. Which graph could represent his profits? So you have to think to yourself, well, if his profit is decreasing, that means that it's a downward slope the whole time between the interval from 10 and 40. So if you're looking at all these answers, I hope that you were prone to pick choice 3. Choice 3 was the correct answer for this one. Because if you look on the interval from 10 to 40, it's decreasing the entire time. So choice 1 makes absolutely no sense because that's a jump, that's a piecewise function. This is increasing on the interval from 10 to 40, and this is increasing and then it's decreasing, so that would not be the correct answer. So the correct answer for number 1 was choice 3. Alright, number 2. The formula for the surface area of a right rectangular prism is A equals 2 length width plus 2 length height plus 2 width height. Where L, W, and H represent the length, width, and the height respectively. Which term in this formula is not dependent on the height? In other words, it's saying which of the following expressions will not be altered if the height changes. Well, surface area. Well, surface area has everything to do with the height changing. If the height changes, if it increases or decreases, there's going to be a change on the surface area. So that's actually dependent on the height. Choice 2, 2 length width. I don't see height in there, so that is the correct answer, choice 2, 2 length width. You see over here, the heights are in these expressions. Heights are in these expressions. So, of course, it's going to have an impact on these two expressions the entire time. So the correct answer for that one is choice 2. All right, number 3. Which graph represents y equals the square root of x minus 2? So the first thing that I got to think of is go right to your calculator, right? If you go to your calculator, by the way, I use the TI Inspire. It's one of the greatest calculators I've ever seen ever. My school uses them, which is pretty cool. So if you type in the square root of x minus 2, you're going to get a sideways half of a parabola. And you'll learn more about that when you get to later mathematics classes. Basically, in Algebra 2 trig, you learn why it's like that. But the answer for that is definitely choice 4. You just have to match that graph. Number 4, student plotted the data from a sleep study as shown in the graph below. It says the student used the equation of the line y equals negative 0.9x plus 9.24 to model the data. What does the rate of change represent in terms of the data? So you have to know what rate of change meant. Rate of change is just a fancy set of terms that means slope. So they're asking you, what in the world does that negative 0.09 mean in the context of this problem? Well, let's understand a couple things. First and foremost, that 9.24 is your y-intercept. It's where the graph starts. In this case, actually, it's only showing the first quadrant, and the y-intercept is your starting sleep number. So, of course, when we're babies, you sleep for a very long time. So that's why that's going to be that 9.24 hours. And as you get older, your sleep starts, you sleep less. I don't know why, but I mean, I'm not a bio teacher or anything, but you tend to sleep less when you get older. So if you're looking at the slope, what does that really mean? Well, the average of number of hours of sleep per day increases. Now, first of all, get rid of these increases answers. Choices 1 and 3 are out. They make absolutely no sense. The average number of hours of sleep per day decreased by 0.09 hours per year of age. That sounds promising. The average number of hours of sleep per day decreases by 9.24 hours per year of age. That makes no sense, because if you're decreasing by 9 hours every single year, you're not going to be sleeping. Sorry. So that's going to be choice 2. That would make the most sense in order to get that question right. Are we 4 for 4? I really do hope we are. Let's take a look at number 5. Lynn, Jude, and Anne were given the function f of x equals negative 2x squared plus 32, and they were asked to find f of 3. Lynn's answer was 14, Jude's answer was 4, and Anne's answer was positive and negative 4, who was correct. So basically, if you have f of x is equal to negative 2x squared plus 32, what you had to do is just input the 3. The 3 is your x value, and you're trying to find your output value. So f of 3 is equal to negative 2 times 3 squared plus 32. Okay, let's just continuing. Well, we're just going to continue to solve this, right? So we get negative 2 times 9 plus 32. That's going to be f of 3 is equal to negative 18 plus 32, and that's going to be an answer of 14. So therefore, f of 3 is equal to 14. So the only person that's actually correct is Lynn. So that's going to be choice 1. Let's take a look at number 6. Which expression is equivalent? All right, this one was kind of tricky because I really didn't agree with this question, but which expression is equivalent to 16x to the 4th minus 64? Now, generally speaking, when math teachers teach how to factor, they usually tell you look for the greatest common factor first and then continue on with the process. They didn't pull out a GCF here. But what they did do is they just decided to go right into dots, which I was really not happy with. But basically what you had to do is you had to go through each answer choice and basically simplify it. So if you take a look at choice 1, you write this twice. So we get 4x squared minus 8, 4x squared minus 8. If you FOIL this, now some of you may have learned FOIL, some of you may have learned box method, the box method. Either of those are acceptable, but this is multiple choice, so it really doesn't matter. But if you simplify this, you get 16x to the 4th minus, let's see, 8, 16, 32, 64x squared plus 64. That's not the same as this. So choice 1's out. Just to save some time, I'll tell you that choice 2's out. Choice 3 is actually the correct answer. And I'll show you why down here. If we take 4x squared plus 8, 4x squared minus 8, and we do foiling. Now, if you FOIL this, you got the right answer immediately. However, you could have saved some time, and you'll actually learn this again in upper level maths. These are called conjugates. A conjugate is the exact same binomial, except they are different signs in the middle. So a positive or negative, negative, positive, it doesn't really matter, but they have to be opposite signs of each other. So we could have really just multiplied the first term times the last term. So this is going to be 16x to the 4th minus 64, and that is equivalent to our expression. So the answer for that one is choice 3. All right, moving along kind of quickly here. Number 7, Vinny collects population data, P of H, about a specific strain of bacteria over time in hours H, as shown on the graph below. Which equation represents the graph of P of H? Okay, so they give you a whole bunch of choices. Plug them into your calculator, see what you get. Let's take a look at choice 1. If I take choice 1 and I plug it into my graphing calculator, that's going to be 4 times 2 raised to the x power. I know it's h for the question, but you have to type an x into your calculator, so it's not going to work. So you get this. Fine. Get your table of values. See if it matches up. The points here are 0, 4, 1, 8, 2, 16, and 332. Does that match up? 0, 4, 1, 8, 2, 16, and 332. That matches up perfect. So that's going to be choice 1 is the correct answer for number 7. All right, moving on to number 8. All right, number 8 says, what is a solution to the... Now, I thought that this was a mean question, but what is a solution to the systems of equations below? So we got this. Great. The first equation's done. It's in y equals form. We're good. The problem is this one. We have to convert this into y equals mx plus b form. So what we get is we get 3 times negative 2x plus y equals 12. We're going to divide by 3 first. We get negative 2x plus y is equal to 4. Now continuing to solve, I'm going to add the 2x on both sides. And we get y is equal to 2x plus 4. So that is actually your second system. Y is equal to 2x plus 4. So basically what we're doing is we're comparing these two. Now, if you did coordinate geometry, great. You should have learned it. But if you didn't know that this was no solution, you may have gotten this one wrong. And I'll tell you why it's no solution. Parallel lines have the same slope. Now, if you have same slope, different intercepts, the lines look like this. And what happens is, if the slopes are the same and the lines never touch, there's absolutely no solutions. They'll never intersect each other. If I were to just graph it for you, 2x plus 8, right? If I were to graph 2x plus 8 on my calculator and 2x plus 4, look at this. They will never, ever touch. No matter how far up if I go up for infinity, it never, ever touches. So that's why it is going to be no solution. Now, if you did it algebraically, that's perfect. If you did it algebraically, that's fine. But you easily could have done it graphically. Let me just show you how to do it algebraically real quick. So to do this algebraically, you had to take y equals 2x plus 8 and set it equal to y equals 2x plus 4 because they're both y equals. So 2x plus 8 is equal to 2x plus 4. But the problem is, and you'll see immediately, if you start subtracting 2x, wait a minute, that cancels too. You get 8 is equal to 4. Huh? Well, since 8 doesn't equal 4, there are no solutions. So that's why that's going to be choice 1. All right, number 9. A mapping is shown in the diagram below. The mapping is what? You had to know that this is equivalent to your x and your y values. Remember that in order for a function to be a function, x values cannot repeat themselves. But if you look here, the month of February does repeat itself in 2 places. We have 2 arrows drawn from February. So therefore, it's not a function. So it's got to be 3 or 4 because February has 2 outputs, 28 and 29. Choice 4 is not a function because 2 inputs, January and March, result in the output of 31. That's not the right answer because January and March don't repeat themselves, only the number 31. You could have multiple repeating y values. It just depends on what your x value is. So that's going to be choice 3 because your February repeats itself. Number 10, which polynomial function has the zeros of negative 3, 0, and 4? So the one thing that you have to understand is in order to get your zeros of a function, you have to set the whole function equal to 0. So how do you get these numbers in the first place? Well, you have to understand to get those values, you have to get factors of its opposite values. What do I mean by that? Well, if I were to take these, the factor that produces the root of negative 3 is x plus 3. The factor that gives you positive 4 is x minus 4. The factor that gives you 0, that's actually just x, and you set the whole thing equal to 0. This would be your polynomial function. And if you just want to double check yourself, do your t-bar or t-chart, whatever you call it. Do your columns. X equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. Then you just subtract the 3 on both sides. You get x equals negative 3. That works. And then you add the 4 on both sides when you set this equal to 0. So you get x is equal to 4. So all of these work. So your answer for this one is going to be choice 3. All right, moving on. By the way, if I did make any mistakes, you could drop a comment and let me know saying, hey, Trev, you made a mistake on this. I don't know what's wrong with you. Well, part of that is 2 o'clock in the morning, but, whatever. But if I did make a mistake, seriously, put a message in the comments below. But I think I got all the questions right. I really did take my time to do this answer key. Number 11, Jordan works for a landscape company during the summer vacation. He is paid $12 for mowing the lawn. So you have to think to yourself, 12 and mowing the lawn, there's got to be a connection between $12 and M for mowing lawns. And $14 per hour for planting gardens. So you have to think, again, 14 and G. He could work a maximum of 40 hours a week, and he would like to earn at least $250 a week. If M represents the number of hours mowing lawn and G represents the number of hours planting gardens, which systems of inequalities could be used to represent the given conditions? So the first thing that you have to think about is if he wants to earn at least $250, you have to be greater than or equal to. Why would you stop at $250? Why would it be less than or equal to? It has to be greater than or equal to. So any answers that had less than or equal to signs, you don't want to stop at that monetary amount or that money amount. Of course you want more money, right? So you get rid of choices 3 and 2. Now we're down to 1 and 4. Now for this case, you just have to match up the variables. Or if you actually looked at the inequalities, here's the difference. He could only work a maximum of 40 hours a week. So that means that he could work 40 or less. So that's why it's going to be choice 1. Because M plus G, he's working less than or equal to 40 hours a week. Choice 4 shows that he's working over 40 hours. So number 11 is choice 1. I hope that we're doing well so far. Let me know how you did in the comments below. Passing score was a 27 out of 86 points. Number 12, Anne invested $1,000 in an account with a 1.3% annual interest rate. She made no deposits or withdrawals on the account for 2 years. If the interest was compounded annually, which equation represents the balance in the account after 2 years? So you have to think to yourself, what is the formula to produce a exponential growth function? And your formula for that is A of t is equal to the principal times 1 plus or minus the rate raised to the t power. Once again, your principal is the starting amount. You will also hear teachers call that the initial amount. Your R is your percent increase or decrease, and t is in time, whether it's in months, years, I don't know, but it's time. Now, the starting amount is $1,000. So you're going to the bank and you're laying down $1,000. So we know immediately A of t has to be $1,000 as the starting amount. But all of them have that as the answer choice. Oh well. When you earn interest on an account, you're gaining money from the bank. It's basically the bank's way of saying, oh, thanks for banking with us. So interest, it makes your account go up. So if it's going up by 1.3%, it's going to be 1 plus the decimal of 0.013 raised to the second power for 2 years. So that knocks out choices 1 and 3 because it's negative. And the only one that works is going to be choice 2. If you chose choice 4, you forgot to convert the percentage into a decimal. So that's going to be choice 2. Number 13. Which value of would be a solution for x in this inequality? Solve the inequality. Let's do it. So we get 47 minus 4x is less than 7. We're going to subtract the 47 on both sides. So we get negative 4x is less than negative 40. And then we're going to divide by a negative 4. Remember, when you're divided by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign. So that's x is greater than positive 10. Now, if it's greater than positive 10, the next integer would be 11 in order for that to work. So that's why it's going to be choice 4 as your answer. All right, number 14. Bella recorded data and used her graphing calculator to find the equation for the line of best fit. This was a tricky question. For the line of best fit, she then used a correlation coefficient to determine the strength of the linear fit. Which correlation coefficient represents the strongest linear relationship? You need to know that your correlation coefficient is between -1 and 1 inclusive. Meaning that if your correlation coefficient is exactly -1 or exactly 1, you have a perfect line. either positive or negative. It doesn't matter which way it's going. Now, if your correlation coefficient is close to 0, you have a scattered, there's just no pattern. There's scattering all over the place. So you really want a correlation coefficient that's really close to -1 or 1. Choice 2 shows a moderate correlation coefficient. So basically it's going up, but it's a little scattered, but it's you could still see a trend of going up. -0.3, that's negative. We could see something going negative, but again, it's kind of getting to that scattered position. If you came down to 1 and 4, you had a 50-50 shot. The answer is choice 1, because that is closer to +1 as opposed to -0.8 closer to -1. 0.9 would be the correct answer because that is the strongest. On a number line, 0.9 would be closer to +1 as to -0.8 would be closer to -1, meaning that that particular answer is not close enough. So that's why it's going to be choice 1. 15. Oh, this one was tricky. The heights in inches of 12 students are listed below. Which statement best describes the spread of these data, or this data? So you're going to go right to your graphing calculator. Go right to it, open up a list in spreadsheets column. So I'm going to call this, let's see, this is the height of students. We're going to type in 61, 67, 72, 62, 65. These are all the heights that they gave you. 59, 60, 79, 60, 61, 64, and 63. All right, so that's the data that they gave you. Now, if you do Control Doc and add a calculator, and go to Menu, Statistics, Stat Calculations, One Variable Statistic, that's your height, then you get this window. Of course, you could put it in your columns over there, but I don't really do that. I like a nice clean page. Now, look at your mean. Your mean is the average in the middle, the 50th percentile. That is 64.4. Your minimum is 59, your median is 62.5, and your max is 79. Now, the question's asking you, which statement best describes the spread of this data? The set of data is evenly spread. Well, if you were to actually go to your calculator and go to Data and Statistics, I could actually graph this on a list and spreadsheets page. And I can make it a histogram if I really wanted to, and that's what you get. Is this evenly spread? Not really. It looks like that more people are leaning towards like 59, 60, 61, 62 inches. It seems like that the average is really over there. And the people on the right-hand side, those are really tall people. So it's not necessarily evenly spread. The median of the data is 59.5. As we just saw on the calculator, the median is 62.5. Makes absolutely no sense. The set of data is skewed because 59 is the only value below 60. Now, the data is skewed. It's actually skewed to the right. I know that there's more on the left, but it's actually skewed to the right. It's its opposite. But it is skewed. But the reasoning's wrong. It's saying because 59 is the only value below 60. I'm sorry. That makes no sense. 59 is close to 61, 62, 63. There's a lot of people in that range. Your answer is going to be choice 4. 79 is an outlier, which would affect the standard deviation of these data. Standard deviation basically means how many spaces will you go past the mean above and below. So if you look, and if you just look at your calculator, look, 79 is way out here. That is an outlier. An outlier is kind of just away from the rest of the group. So that's why it's going to be choice 4. That was a tricky question. I didn't like that one. I wasn't too pleased with it. All right, 16. I hope that you just graph this in your calculator. If you graph it in your calculator, that's fine. But if you actually want to interpret it yourself using some mathematics, that's perfectly fine as well. The graph of the quadratic function is shown below. An equation that represents this function could be what? All right, let's talk about this without looking at the answers. You have to think to yourself, what could the answer be? First of all, you know that your vertex or your turning point is 15, 25. We know that the leading coefficient, which is your leading number, has to be less than the number 1 because it's a frowny face. It's sad. It's negative. So if we're looking at our answer choices, this is in vertex form. This isn't in standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. No, this is in vertex form. So these outside numbers that you see here, your 25s, are your vertical shift. It's being shifted up. So therefore, it can't be choices 1 and 2. Now, if you're going to the right by 15 units, that's a minus sign inside those parentheses. They're both minus signs. We don't know that. We can't determine which one is the answer just yet. Now, it's a frowny face. I said that the leading coefficient is negative. If you look at your answer choices, look at these numbers. One of them's positive, one of them's negative. Your answer is going to be choice 4, negative 1/2 x minus 15 squared plus 25. And if you just want to see how that's graphed, you would get negative 1/2 parenthesis x minus 15 quantity squared plus 25. And then we get that. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Maybe 25, right? There it is. Perfect. So we definitely know that we graphed the right function. That's why it's going to be choice 4. Number 17, moving along. Which statement is true about the quadratic functions g of x, shown in the table below, and f of x, which is x minus 3 squared plus 2. So what you had to do in order to get this question right is, A, you could have graphed your first one, or, of course, you could have done some just basic mathematics and interpreting the function. Let's take a look at this for example. The vertex, or the turning point, can be determined in vertex form. This is, again, in vertex form. So we know that if you have x minus 3 squared, we know that it is a horizontal shift to the right by 3 units. So therefore, it's going to be positive 3, positive 2. That positive 2 is a vertical shift up. Now, your axis of symmetry is your x value for your vertex. So whatever your x value is for your vertex, that's where the axis of symmetry is. The axis of symmetry just basically means you're splitting the quadratic in half at its vertex or turning point value. So your axis of symmetry is x is equal to 3 for this. Let's take a look at g of x. Your turning point for this is where everything changes. 3, negative 5. So obviously they don't have the same vertex. They don't have the same zeros. But they do have the same axis of symmetry. Because this is your vertex for this one. Your vertex of g of x is 3, negative 5. And I said that your axis of symmetry is the same x value as your turning point. So that is x is equal to positive 3. They both have the same axis of symmetry. So that's going to be choice 3. Number 18. This was, I thought that this was a mean question. Absolutely. So let's take a look at this. So the question is saying, given the function f of n defined by the following, so f1 equals 2. That is your starting value or your initial condition. And f of n is equal to negative 5 f of n minus 1 plus 2. This is a recursive sequence. Recursion means that you take the previous term and you plug it into your next term to find it. So we have to use this. So we know that f of 1 is 2. Let's go ahead and find the other values. Let's find f of 2. When you're finding f of 2, you're plugging in 2 for n. So we get negative 5 f of 2 minus 1 plus 2. Okay. That's equal to negative 5 f of 1 plus 2. Many people get lost here. What do you do now? Well, you know what f of 1 is. F of 1 is 2, which is what we found in the previous section. Or they gave it to us, honestly. So we have f of 2 is equal to negative 5 times 2 plus 2. That's equal to negative 10 plus 2, which is equal to negative 8. So we know that f of 2 is equal to negative 8. So we could definitely knock out choice 1 and choice 4. Now, you could have stopped here, but I'm going to go one more time just to show you the pattern. So if we're finding f of 3, that's equal to negative 5f of 3 minus 1 plus 2. That's going to be negative 5f of 2 plus 2, which is negative 5 times the previous term, which is negative 8, plus 2. That's going to be 40 plus 2, which is equal to 42. That's your f of 3. Now, you need to know what it's asking. Which set could represent the range? The range are your outputs. The range are your output values. Which of the following represents the outputs of this function? If you fell for choice 3, I understand why you picked it, but the answer is choice 2. You had to take into account that your a sub 1, your first term, is the number 2. Because when you write a series of numbers or a sequence is just a listing of numbers. It's A1, A2, A3, plus blah, 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 and then A sub n, whatever that is. So you have to include the first term. They gave you choice 3 to trick you purposefully. So that's why the answer is going to be choice 2. I really didn't like that one, but it is what it is. All right, number 19. An equation is given below. Solve for x. Great. So we are going to distribute the 0.3, and let's get our solutions. We get 4x minus 28 is equal to 0.3x plus 0.6 plus 2.11. I would combine like terms over here first. So we're getting 4x minus 28 is equal to 0.3x plus 2.71. So now we're going to add the 28, I guess. You can do whatever you want. Just pick the way that's the easiest way. Let's see, 2.71 plus 28, so that's going to be 30.71. Subtract the 0.3x, subtract the 0.3x. Let's see, that's going to be 4 minus 0.3. You get that number, and then we're going to divide. We're going to take 30.71 and divide it by that number, which is going to be an answer of 8.3, which is going to be choice 1 to get that question right. Number 20. This was the question that many people were asking me about when they walked out. A construction worker needs to move 120 feet cubed of dirt by using a wheelbarrow. One wheelbarrow load holds 8 feet cubed of dirt, and each load takes about 10 minutes for him to complete. One correct way to figure out the number of hours he would need to complete the job is what? Okay. Now, when I saw this question, I didn't think of conversions. I immediately thought, what is the best way to interpret this? Well, I just use logical sense. First of all, there's 120 feet of dirt to move. Find out how many barrels or buckets of dirt that he has to haul to a different location. So it's 120 divided by 8 feet. What I'm finding is the amount of wheelbarrows I need to wheel over to get rid of that dirt. That's going to be 15 wheelbarrows. Okay? Now, how long does it take to wheel one wheelbarrow? It takes 10 minutes. So I'm going to take 15 wheelbarrows times your 10 minutes. It's going to take a total of 150 minutes. Now, if you know your hours, you know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So you know that you're going to be working, if you're working for 150 minutes, you're going to be working 2 hours and 30 minutes. If you knew this, you were good to go. Because it's saying one way to figure out the number of hours he would need to complete the job is what, and they give you all these fractions. If you typed all of these fractions into your calculator, and whichever one produced an answer of 2.5 would give you your answer. And your answer is choice 4. So, when I type it into my calculator, it's 120, hold on a second, it's 120 times 1/8 times 10 times 1/60. And if it's 2.5, we got the right answer. That's 5 halves, which is 2.5. Bingo. So we know definitely that we have the right answer. Now, if you didn't know what to do, like the way that I just did it, you need to understand when you're doing conversion factors, your units have to cancel every single time. So feet cancels with feet, load cancels with load, minutes cancels with minutes, and you're left with hours. So if you didn't know how to do that, you should have seen a pattern where you're canceling out those units. 21 bothered me a lot, and it made me think for a good 5 to 10 minutes. One characteristic of all linear functions is that they change by, first of all, you know that linear functions is a constant rate of change. You know that your slope is going up or going down or whatever it is, but we definitely know it's constant. It's not exponential, it's not quadratic, it's not any of that stuff. We know it's all equal. So it can't be choices 2 or 4 that shows unequal. You just had to know this definition of a linear function. They are equal differences over equal intervals. So if you were to graph a line, your equal intervals is this, your slopes. Or by what your slope goes up or down by, those are your equal intervals, followed by equal differences. Sorry, I can't speak tonight. Equal differences. So that's going to be choice 3. If you chose equal factors, factors isn't the best answer to choose, so that's going to be choice 3. That was just a definition of a linear function. 22. What are the solutions to the equation x squared minus 8x equals 10? So just by looking at your answers, you kind of assume that you're going to be using the quadratic formula anyway. So I would just use x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So your a is 1, your b is negative 8, your c is negative 10 when you move it over. So we're going to plug this in. X is equal to negative, I just said plug it in, I didn't. Negative 8 plus minus the square root, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 10 all over 2 times 1. Okay, cool. X equal to positive 8 plus minus the square root of 64 plus 40 all over 2. And now we just continue to simplify. So we get x is equal to positive 8 plus minus the square root of, what is that going to be? 104. Oh, shoot. Sorry, on my answer key, I actually did completing the square. Damn. All right, I'll do that afterwards. So in order to simplify radical 104, you have to think of the numbers that go into radical 104 to get to produce a perfect square. So 104 divided by even numbers, 26 is probably the best answer. So 4 and 26. If you break down radical 104, you break it down into the square root of 4 and the square root of 26. The square root of 4 is 2 radical 26. Plug it back in. X is equal to 8 plus minus 2 rad 26 all over 2. All of these numbers here, here, and here can be simplified by reducing it by 2. So the 2's cancel, the 8 cancels, and that produces a 4. So that's x is equal to 4 plus minus the square root of 26, which is going to be choice 2. If you did the completing the square method, this is how it's going to look. If you did completing the square, this is how it's going to look. So if you have x squared minus 8x equals 10, this is how we do it. X squared minus 8x plus something equals 10 plus something. You leave letters on one side, numbers on the other side. Now, to get your blank spaces, in order to create a perfect square trinomial, you take half the middle term and square it. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. 16 is 16. Then you factor this, what adds to negative 8 and multiplies to give you 16. That's x minus 4, which is equal to 26. You know, or you should know, that x minus 4 can be written as x minus 4 quantity squared is equal to 26. Then you take the square root of both sides to solve for x. X minus 4 is equal to plus minus the square root of 26. And last but not least, you're going to add that 4 to both sides. You get x is equal to 4 plus minus rad 26, which is the same answer as before. 2 more questions in the multiple choice. The formula for blood flow rate is given by F equals P1 minus P2 over R, where F is the flow rate, P is the initial pressure, P2 is the final pressure, and R is the resistance created by blood vessel size. All right, which formula cannot be derived from the given formula? Just to save some time, it's going to be choice 3. There's no possible way to get R equals F times P2 minus P1. In order for this to work, it had the original formula had to be F is equal to R over P1 minus P2. And then you could cross multiply, and then you get R is equal to F times P2 minus P1. It's not what it's giving you, so that's why it's going to be choice 3. There's no possible way to get that answer. All right? So that's going to be choice 3. 24. Morgan throws a ball into the air. The height of the ball above the ground is in feet, is modeled by that function, which is right here. Where t represents time in seconds since the ball was thrown. What is the appropriate domain? Domain are your x values. If you have h of t, remember t is your x. T means time, which you're measuring in seconds. If you look at all your answer choices, choices 3 and 4, that h of t, that's your range. Those are your y values. So now you're looking for, well, how long was the ball in the air for? So if you just graph it on your calculator, negative 16x squared plus 24x, it looks like, from here, it looks like it's you're starting to throw the ball from the ground position. You throw it up, and then it comes back down, and it takes 1.5 seconds to throw the ball up, and then to come back down. So that's why your appropriate domain is going to be choice 1, which is 0 to 1.5 inclusive. I hope that you did well on the multiple choice. That's the end of the multiple choice section. Now we're moving into the part 2s. In my opinion, the part 2s were fairly simple. When we get later in the exam, it gets a little bit more tricky. 25 was a perfect question to rack up some points. Express in simplest form. Great. This is your keep change problem. I don't call it keep change. I just say distribute by a -1, and the signs will eventually change, but if you learn keep change, it's perfectly fine. So we get 3x squared plus 4x minus 8. That -1's being distributed, so everything changes. Plus 2x squared minus 4x minus 2. It says expressed in simplest form, so now we need to combine like terms. So your 4x and your -4x, those actually cancel with each other. So those actually go away. Then the next common terms is going to be -8 and -2. Your final, and one more. Your positive 2x squared and your 3x squared. That will produce an answer of 5x squared minus 10. That would be acceptable. Or if you factored out that 10, you got x squared minus 2. That would also be an accepted answer on this question. So that's the answer to number 25. Number 26, graph the function f of x equals -x squared minus 6x on the set of axes below. So I'm going to set up a table of values x and y. So we're going to go to my graphing calculator here. We're going to graph -x squared minus 6x. We get this. Control T. Find out where your turning point is, where everything changes. It changes at -3. So it's going to be -3 is in the middle. So we're going to go, I like to go 3 above, 3 below. So -2, -1, 0, -3, -4, -5, -6. Okay, so these points are 0, 5, 8, 9, 8, 5, 0. You're just going to graph those points. -1, I'm going to change the color. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, 0, -5, 5, -4, 8, -3, 9, -2, 8, -1, 5, 0, 0. That's all you had to draw. That is your quadratic. Make sure you put arrows on the end. Make sure that you label. Actually, and I know it sounds crazy, but I drill into my, and most math teachers, but I drill into my students' heads that I tutor. Make sure that you label and draw arrows if you need it. If you actually didn't label or draw arrows, you actually got full credit anyway, as long as the quadratic was correct. Then it says state the coordinates of the vertex. Vertex is the turning point. Perfect. Vertex is where everything changes. That's the point -3, 9. That will give you full credit on that question. Moving along. Number 27. State whether 7 radical 2 is a rational or an irrational number. Explain your answer. So you had to say that 7 minus radical 2 is an irrational. It was irrational. An irrational number. Because since the square root of 2 is an irrational number, which it is, the subtraction, because we are subtracting, the subtraction of a rational number, which is 7, and an irrational number, sorry for my chicken scratch, I'm going a little quick here, an irrational number will produce or yield or produce an irrational number. You get full credit for saying that. And you could say that an irrational, and if you just want to add on, an irrational number is non-terminating and non-repeating. So that was number 27. I didn't think it was that bad. Number 28. The value v of t of a car depreciates according to the function v of t equals p times 0.85 to the t power, where p is the purchase price. Remember, that's your initial price or your starting amount price of the car, and T is the time in years since the car was purchased. State the percent. State the percent that the value of the car decreases by each year. Well, of course, if you have a car, it's going to depreciate in value because the cost of a car goes down. Of course, if you have an antique car, then that will go up. But most cars do depreciate. So you had to remember your formula was A of t is equal to your principal times 1 plus or minus your rate raised to the t power. Since you have a number that is less than the number 1, you know that it's 1 minus the rate is equal to 0.85. Now, if you subtracted the 1, you get negative r is equal to negative 0.15, and then you divide by negative 1 on both sides, and you get r is equal to 0.15. I will tell you this, I think I'll burst some bubbles here. If you left this as your answer and you said this is the value of r that makes it depreciate, you got this question wrong because it's specifically asking you state the percent of decrease. 0.15 is the same thing as 15%. You had to state 15% in order to get full credit. And then it says justify your answer. This right here, this is your justification. It's math. That's your justification. But if you wanted to say, I said the percent that the car decreases each year by 15% because due to the formula a sub t equals p times 1 plus or minus r to the t, r is a percent rate. If you said that, perfect, you got it right. But if you just showed your work, that's also justification. Number 29. I've never seen this as a part 2, honestly, but whatever. A survey of 100 students was taken. Stop right there. A survey of 100 students was taken. That's your total amount at the very end. Great. It was found that 60 students watched sports. Great. Watched sports. The total people were 60. 34 of these people did not like pop music. So 34 goes here. Now, what number goes over here? Well, it's the total number of people who watch sports minus the people who don't like pop music to get the number of people who liked pop music. So that's going to be 60 minus 34, and that's going to be 26 people. Now it says, okay, now wait a minute. Since there were 100 people surveyed, and 60 people responded to watching sports, that means that 40 people do not watch sports. That was the key to this question. Then it said of the students who do not watch sports, 70% of those people liked pop music. Well, if you take 40 and multiply it by 70%, you're going to get an answer of 28. That means that 28 people like pop music. So that's your 28 people. Now, in order to get this number, it's your 40 minus 28, which is equal to 12 people who don't like pop music. The total numbers over here, you're just adding along the way. So 26 plus 28, that's equal to 54. 34 plus 12 is equal to 46. Make sure that adds up to 100, and it does. That will give you full credit on your question for number 29. All right, number 30, graph the inequality. Put it in y equals form, or y is less than form in this case. So you're going to subtract the 4 on both sides. You get y is less than negative 2 times x minus 4 minus 4. Distribute that negative 2. You get y is less than negative 2x plus 8 minus 4, which is equal to y is less than negative 2x plus 4. Your slope is negative 2. Your y-intercept is 4. Graph it. Go up 1, 2, 3, 4. Go down 2 to the right 1, down 2 to the right 1, down 2 to the right 1, blah, blah, blah. And you just do your thing, keep on going, and you repeat the process above. You draw a dotted line, which I need to change the color. So you're going to draw a dotted line because it's less than. It's not less than or equal to, it's less than. So it's a dotted line not included. And since it's less than, you're shading below. So that's going to be y plus 4 is less than negative 2, x minus 4. And that's all you had to do for that question. Great. I hope that was easy. Let's go on to 31. If f of x equals x squared and g of x equals x, determine the values of x that satisfy the equation when f of x is equal to g of x. You're setting these expressions equal to each other, or equations actually, because they're equal signs. So just set x squared equal to x. Great. Subtract the x on both sides. This is actually a quadratic, folks. X squared minus x equals 0. How many people thought that it wasn't a quadratic? I mean, maybe a lot, maybe not. I don't know. But if you didn't know that this was a quadratic, I mean, maybe you might have graphed it and got the answer that way. I mean, I don't know how else to really explain it. But in this case, since it is a quadratic and they both have x's, for your quadratic term and your linear term, you can take out an x, that's your GCF, you're left with x minus 1 equals 0, t bar at x equals 0, x equals positive 1. Those are your answers. You could box it, you could do whatever you got to do, you could put in your little funny looking brackets, whatever you put your answer as. But the answer is 0, 1. 0 and 1. 32. Describe the effect of each transformation below that has on the function f of x equals the absolute value of x, where a is greater than the number 0. By them saying a is greater than 0, that makes sure that these negatives do not change. If a was less than 0, those negatives would become positive. That would change the whole complexity of the problem. Now, since a is greater than 0, that's perfect. We know what we're doing. They're all minus signs. So for this particular question, g of x equals the absolute value of x minus a, this is going to be a horizontal shift. Whenever it's in those absolute value bars, it's going to be a horizontal shift, and it's opposite of what the sign is. So this is a horizontal shift to the right by however many a units it is. Okay? And then this is a vertical shift. Anything that's outside of those bars, it's a vertical shift. So this is going to be a vertical shift down by a units. I don't think that you had to put a units, but if you just said horizontal shift to the right and vertical shift down, you would have gotten full credit for that one, I believe. All right, now we're moving on to the part 3s. So the function r of x is defined by the expression x squared plus 3x minus 18. Use factoring to determine the zeros of r of x. Great. They tell us what to use. So x squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Let's hope it's a nice, easy quadratic. Well, what adds to positive 3 and multiplies to give you negative 18? Well, that's just going to be x plus 6, x minus 3 equals 0. Set up your t-chart or t-bar or whatever you want to call it. X equals negative 6, x is equal to positive 3. These are your zeros. So I'm going to say in a sentence, the zeros of f of x are x equals negative 6 and x is equal to 3. That's all they wanted, folks. They didn't want a y value. They just asked you for the zeros of the function. Then it says, explain what the zeros represent. You had to know that the zeros are the x values where the quadratic intersects the x-axis. If you said something on the lines of that, you got full credit. All right, that was number 33. All right, great, moving along. 34. This was the question that I hated on this Regents. I couldn't believe they asked you this question. If you took this test, I feel sorry for you. Because I thought it wasn't hard, but I thought it was just ridiculous. And I'll show you why. The graph below models Craig's trip to visit his friend in another state. Okay. In the course of his travels, he encountered both highway traffic and city driving. So what you had to know, and you know, if you're taking a Regents, you live in New York State. If you live in the city, you know you're not driving more than 30 miles an hour. Just saying. So it's a lot of traffic in the city, especially Manhattan. You ain't moving. So it says, based on the graph, during which interval did Craig most likely drive in the city? Explain your answer. Now explain your reasoning. First of all, it says which interval, meaning one interval of where he's driving in the city. Now, chances are, if you're on a highway, and the reason why I didn't like this question, what if the highway had traffic? You don't know. They didn't say anywhere where the highway didn't have traffic, but whatever. It says here, during which interval, meaning one interval. You could assume, using logical sense, that the city's probably going to be moving a lot slower, so your interval is going to be from D to E. That's where your average rate of change is your slowest, or it's changing at the slowest rate. So your answer is going to be Craig most likely, I should say. Most likely drove in the city on the interval. Now, of course, you didn't have to word it like this. On the interval from 5 to 7 inclusive, because this is my my explanation or my justification. Because the vehicle was traveling at a rate of 15 miles per hour, which is relatively slow if you were driving on a highway. That would be your correct justification. If you said something on the lines of that, you got full credit for that particular question. I didn't really like it that much, but, you know, what can we do? Then it says, explain what might have happened in the interval from B to C. From B to C. All right, let me zoom in a little bit here. B to C, we're looking at here, over here. Now, this is your miles traveled. Look at this. Craig is staying at 110 miles. So there are so many possible answers that you could have put for this. I said 2 answers. So I think that these would be acceptable immediately. So I said for the first one, I said between points B and C, traffic was at a standstill due to a major car accident. So, of course, if the highway was closed, you're going to be sitting there for a good hour and a half, if not more, to clear out the damage, clear out the cars, get police reports from people, transport people to the hospital, God forbid, and all that other stuff. So that's why that would be an acceptable answer. Or you could just say that Craig stopped the vehicle. You had to say something on the lines of stopping the vehicle, or the vehicle was in the same position. So Craig stopped the vehicle for food at a fancy restaurant. Doesn't have to be fancy, but just at a restaurant. I mean, I could spend an hour and a half at a restaurant. I mean, you know, the Cheesecake Factory, you're there for a while, or any restaurant that you really go to. But the Cheesecake Factory, I'm easily there for 2 hours. So that would be an acceptable answer. Then it says determine Craig's average speed to the nearest tenth of a mile per hour for his entire trip. You're taking the slope of the entire function, which is your change in y over your change in x, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You're looking at points E and A. Points E and A. So you're looking here and here. And I'll just read off those coordinates. Point A is 0, 0, and point E is 7. Point E is 7, 230. So that's going to be 230 minus 0 over 7 minus 0. That's going to be 230 over 7. He's moving, the average speed, that's going to be 32.9 miles per hour would give you full credit. And that's the nearest tenth of a mile per hour. All right. That's it for that question. Now, for number 35, it says solve the equation g of x equals 2 times k of x, for algebraically for x to the nearest tenth. So you had to realize that you had to multiply your k function by 2. So g of x, which is just 2x squared plus 3x plus 10, set that equal to 2 times 2x plus 16. Distribute the 2, we get 2x squared plus 3x plus 10 equals 4x plus 32. Solve for x. Subtract the 4x on both sides, subtract the 32 on both sides. We get 2x squared minus x minus 22 equals 0. I will tell you this right now. If you try to factor it using GCF, dots, trinomial, or the earmuff method, which is also called the AC method, it's not going to work. You had to use either completing the square or quadratic formula. So I personally did the quadratic formula. I think that's the easiest. So again, x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's going to be negative 1 plus minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 22 all over 2 times 2. Once again, if you're watching, this is not an explanation video. This is just to see how fast I could get these answers out to you to see how you did on your readings exam. So this is 1 plus minus the square root of 1 plus 176 all over 2. That's 1 plus or minus the square root of 177 all over 2. When you type this into your calculator, you're going to get two solutions because it's plus and minus. So your answers are x is equal to 3.6 and x is equal to negative 3.1 would be your answers for that question. That would give you 2 points. Then it says, explain why you chose the method you used to solve for this quadratic equation. I said, my explanation, I said quadratic formula was chosen because 2x squared minus x minus 22 equals 0 was not factorable. It was not factorable by the basic trinomial method. Now what do I mean by that? You need to be a little bit more specific. Trinomial method, by figuring out what adds to the linear term and multiplies to the constant term. You said this, you got full credit. All right. We're almost there. Almost there. 36. Michael has $10 in his savings account. Option 1 will allow him to add $100 per week. Option 2 will double the amount in his account at the end of each week. Pfft, I wish I could do that. Write a function in terms of x to model each option of saving. So option 1. Now option 1's linear. What do we mean by that? Well, you're increasing by 100 each time. So it's y, I actually call it, no, I call this f of x. I said f of x, you could have put y, but I put f of x is equal to the slope of 100, x, which is weeks, plus his initial amount or his y-intercept of $10. That's his starting amount. Then option 2, that's going to be g of x is equal to his initial amount of $10. He's doubling it raised to the x power. These would be your two option formulas. You would get full credit if you wrote those. Then it says Michael wants to have at least, wait a minute, at least $700. That means greater than or equal to. He doesn't just want $700. Of course you want more than that. It says in his account at the end of 7 weeks to buy a mountain bike. Who doesn't want a mountain bike? Determine which options would enable him to reach the goal. Justify your answer. What you had to do, and this is actually quite simple, you had to find f of 7 and g of 7. All you had to do is you just had to take 7 and plug it in. Now, keep in mind, they're not asking you which one's the better one. They're asking you which options would work to reach his goal. And that was a common confusion that people had today, or whenever you took this exam, which was on June 13th. But whenever you're watching this. So f of 7, that's going to be 100 times 7 plus 10 from our function that we had up at the top. Sorry, that's a 7, not a 2. That's going to equal $700 plus $10. That's going to equal $710. My 7s are really gross on this program. $710. There we go. G of 7 is 10 times 2 to the 7. That's going to be $1,280. Now, of course, option 2 is going to work more. You're going to have more money in your pocket. But that's not what the question's asking you. It's asking you which options would work. You would say both options because both exceed his goal of $700 at time, again that's 7, at time t equals 7 weeks. Full credit. Done. All right. Now we're going to go on to the very last question, where I thought, honestly, that the wording of this question was really not that great. Take a look at 37. Central High School has 5 members, or had 5 members on their swim team in 2010. Over the next several years, the team increased by an average of 10 members per year. So I'm going to call this S of W. Okay? S of W is your initial amount. They had 5 members on the team. That's your y-intercept. And they're adding 10 members per year. It's a linear function. You're adding by 10 each time for each year. Now, the chorus, I'm going to call that I'm going to call that X. Whoops. X and X. Now, your chorus, that's going to be, all right, so the same school had 35 members in their course 2010. Again, that's your y-intercept. And so an increase of 5 members per year. Write a system of equations to model the situation where X represents the number of years since 2010. Great, we got that. Those are your 2 systems of linear equations. Fantastic. So now we're just going to go ahead and do what they asked us to do. Graph it. So you definitely saw this coming. So your y-axis should be labeled as members of the group. Group being swim team or course, doesn't really matter. And this is the number of years since 2010. Now, if you wanted to put a title on this graph, I would have done predictions of amounts of future members, I guess. That would be an acceptable answer. I'm not 100% sure, but you didn't have to title this graph. It just says graph it. Fine. So you need to label. So I did 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I went up by 5s here, but 10, 20, 30. Now, I did go by 5s because I'm skipping the lines. You don't have to write 5, 10, 50. You don't need to write that. But if you did, that's perfectly fine. But I'm going by 5s here. 45, 50, 55, 60. No, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Oh, sorry. I just switched over by mistake. Whoopsies. All right. 50, 60, 70. No, hold on a second. I definitely skipped one of these. Hold on. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. There we go. Now my swimmer, the swimming function is red, so I'm just going to graph it in red. So that's going to be your 10x plus 5. So it starts off at 5, increasing by 10. So it's going to be, at 1, it's going to be 15. At 2, it's just going to be increasing by this. It's going to be increasing by 10 each week. So that's going to be here. 4 is going to be at 45. 5 is going to be at 55. 6 is going to be at 65. 7 is going to be at 75. 8 is going to be at 85. 9 is going to be at 95. And then it stops there. So now I'm going to draw a line that passes through those points. And I'm going to label it. That does have an arrow at the end, by the way. I could probably change the thickness on this. Hold on one second. Much better. Okay. So there's your line. And I'm going to label it as y, or sorry, no, not that, s of x is equal to 10x plus 5. Then, graphing my blue function, that's going to start off at 35 and go up by 5s. So it's going to look something like this. 2, it's going to go up by 5, going to go up by 5, up by 5, up by 5, do it. Oh, they're probably going to ask us about that intersection point very soon. Going to go up again, dun, 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 and done. Now, I'm going to do the same thing again with my line. Make it blue. And there's your line. And I'm going to label it as c of x for your course is equal to 5x plus 35. Label your intersection point. That's the point 6, 65. Now it says, for a follow question, it says explain in detail what each coordinate of the point of intersection in these equations mean in the context of this problem. So you had to say the following. And it's going to be long, so bear with me. The x coordinate represents represents the amount of years after 2010 where the members of both groups will equal each other. This will occur 6 years, really in 2016, but 6 years after 2010. Then the y-coordinate, the y-coordinate represents the amount of members in both groups after 6 years. And then you could just say that both groups will have 65 members after the 6 years. Done. So, I really hope that you keep watching. I really hope that you did well on this Regents. The passing score was a 27. If you got a passing score, put it in the comments below. Say, yay, passed. And I hope that you did well. If you were aiming for 100, it took a really nutty, insane brain to achieve that score. And if you were aiming for 100, I hope that you got it. Overall, I thought that this test was decent. It was okay. And, you know, I hope that you guys really did well on it. And just pat yourself on the back and really be proud of yourselves. Visit my website, www.nysmathregisprep.com. My website is just starting to get rolling here. It's starting to move a little bit. Stick around with me for Algebra 1, Geometry, Trig, and after I do all that stuff, I'm actually going to be starting AP Calculus. So if you plan on taking AP Calculus, you're going to be with me throughout high school. So really do stick around, hit that subscribe button down below. It will really help me a lot to grow this into something huge, just to help all students across New York State. All right, and I will see you around. I hope that all of you did well, and have a wonderful day or evening whenever you're watching this. All right, see you soon.